In today's YouTube video, I will show you how to draw and paint these bananas. So I love sketching on my iPad just because it's so easy to bring it with me wherever I want. So first of all, I will show you how I usually transfer these digital illustrations on my watercolor paper. So I will be using my favorite paper today, which is Arches hot pressed pure cotton 300-gram paper. I will place this sheet on top of my iPad. So now you don't really see the drawing, but when I turn the light off, you see that it pops there immediately and I can see through my watercolor sheet of paper. So basically it allows me to transfer my drawing on watercolor paper very easily. So I'm just sitting in a dark room and I can totally see all the lines through my paper. So I can place them and create the drawing easily and very quickly. I just need to make sure that I don't miss any lines. So I take my time and tracing everything carefully. I'm trying not to press too hard with my pencil because I want my lines still be quite thin, so keep that in mind. When I'm done, I turn my light on again and you can see that my drawing is now on this watercolor paper. So it's perfect. All I need to do then is to work on some details and maybe trace the lines that I accidentally missed during this process. So I kind of need to restore these lines that are missing, maybe add a couple of additional details where I think it's needed. And I think at this stage I'm quite happy with my drawing. I'm just making the outline a bit bolder, adding few strokes that I think were missing in my original drawing and that I would like to add. And there you go. This is the final drawing. So now it's time to pass to the painting process. These are the colors that I will be using today. So mainly yellows. So I have my cadmium yellow, my lemon yellow. I use watercolors in tubes, but feel free to use watercolors in pans if you prefer. I'm also using this olive green. I will be using some ochre, and I will also use some shades of blue and brown for this painting. Now let's talk about brushes. So I usually use round synthetic brushes with sharp tip. I will need a jar with clear water and some paper towels. And now it's time to start mixing my colors. So I will start from this light green color. To be able to mix it, I used some of my green, which is just a normal green in this brand that I'm using, which is Nevskaya Palitra, but it can be also called sap green or something like this. I mixed it with my lemon yellow and I obtained this light green color that I'm applying to the base of the stem of these bananas. Now I'm adding more of my cadmium yellow and I'm creating this transition from green to yellow. So you see I'm trying to make this transition as seamless as possible. So I just keep painting all of the bananas all together until I reach the end of each banana. Next step, I'm adding some shadows to my bananas already and I used my ochre to do so. So I just mixed my ochre with water and I'm starting to apply this color to the left side of each one of these bananas by following its natural shape. So I decided that my light source will be in the top right corner and it means that the shadow will be on the opposite side, so on the left side. That's exactly where I'm placing this color right now. Then to be able to make this transition even more seamless, I smooth out the edges with my clean and dry brush to be able to have a smooth transition between shadow and light areas. So I'm just keep going this way on all of my bananas. And now I took my brown color and I'm starting to fill these holes in between these bananas because there is even more shadow there. So that's why these areas will be the darkest ones in our painting. So I'm working very carefully with the very tip of my brush and I'm making these lines and filling these gaps in between my bananas. Then I use the same color to accentuate the shadow and the bananas itself as well. And then with the usual method, I smooth out the edge to make everything look seamless and blended together. I'm using both the body and the tip of my brush. And now I'm mixing one more, even darker color. I added some blue and green to my brown to obtain this very dark color. And now I'm covering this area that connects our bananas to this stem. And you see that I'm working with the tip of my brush and I'm being very careful. And then I'm adding this same dark color to these shadow areas in between my bananas. So these are the darkest areas. That's why I already accentuate them. And I also use the same color to separate the bananas from one another visually by creating these outlines. But make sure that these outlines are not uniform and that you place them only in some areas and not around the whole banana, because this will make it look flat. I'm mixing my blue color and I will use it to create these tips of my banana that are darker. So I'm starting with this blue color because I don't like using pure black color. I think other colors usually work nicer for these things, and actually you cannot even notice that it's a blue. And then if I want, I can always make this color darker later on because we are working from light to dark here. Now it's time to add some texture. To be able to do so, I'm using the dry brush technique. It means that I have more color than water on my brush. So my brush is almost dry, and that's why this technique is called dry brush technique. And I'm creating these strokes that I'm trying to make as equal as possible to one another. And I'm following the natural shape of my bananas. So you see, I'm placing these strokes very close to each other. So it's almost like hatching with my pencil, but here I'm doing it with my watercolor. This is personally the effect I really like, and this is kind of the touch I like to give to my illustrations, but you don't have to do the same thing if you don't like it, so feel free to add your own personal touches to your illustrations. After that, I'm starting to accentuate shadows on each bananas individually once again. So I mixed this kind of a gray color by mixing some ochre brown and olive green, and I'm creating these shadow areas and kind of accentuating this core shadow, so this transition between light and shadow. I just want to make it more obvious. And then I mix one more dark color, very similar to the previous ones that I was using. And again, I am darkening this area in between my bananas even more because I want to visually separate them from one another. I think it will give even more contrast, depth, and interest to our illustration. I'm also accentuating this shadow area even more and start to add details to my bananas. So with the same color, I also started to add details to these tips of my bananas. Now you see I'm using this very, very dark color. Now it's time to make our bananas even more saturated and vibrant. To be able to do so, I will apply a thin wash of yellow paint on my bananas. So I'm mixing my cadmium yellow with water, and I'm applying a thin wash of this color to the tips of my bananas. I will smooth out this transition here as you saw me doing previously. So again, with my clean and dry brush. I'm also adding this light green color to this upper part of the bananas. And again, I'm smoothing out the edge to make the transition seamless. I then add this green color to the tips of my bananas, and you see that I applied it a bit roughly at this stage because I know I will be smoothing out these edges like you see me doing here with the usual method, and you see that it gave this green hue to the tips of my bananas. I think this is exactly the effect I was going for. My bananas look a bit more realistic and saturated this way, so I will continue this process. And then once I'm done and my layer is dry, I will add these even darker details. I'm using a similar color for that, but a more dark version of it. So I added some olive green to it. And now again, I'm darkening these areas in between my bananas even more. So I'm outlining the edge of each of our bananas with this dark brown color that I've mixed with blue to make it look even darker. And you see that I'm using the tip of my brush and I'm working very, very carefully because I don't want to ruin all the work I just did on my bananas. I just want to underline this contrast here. Now I'm adding more of this saturated yellow color to the whole surface of my bananas. This time I decided to use my lemon yellow. And once I'm done, I'm adding even more shadow on the left side of each of my bananas. So I used one of my previous colors that I already had on my color palette, but I've added even more ochre to it. So now I decided to add more of this green again on top. So you see, because watercolor is translucent, it allowed me to introduce this new hue without actually ruining everything which is did underneath. So now it's time to add final touches to my painting. I'm doing so with this same color I was using previously, and I'm adding these strokes and spots to my bananas. At this stage, I'm really trying to capture the details and even maybe the small imperfections on my fruits, because I think it adds some character to my painting and makes it look more like real fruits and not something made of plastic. I think all these lines and little dots will give my illustration a bit more personal look and make it look a bit more alive. Again, I'm using my favorite hatching method here, so I just use the tip of my brush and the dry brush technique, and I'm creating these lines again, these strokes. Don't forget to follow the shape of your subjects while you're doing so. This is very important. Now I'm adding this dark brown to the shadow areas of each of these bananas. Again, I am smoothing out the edge each time I do so. To make my bananas look even more vibrant, I add same cadmium yellow I previously added. Just be careful with not darkening your white or your light areas too much from the beginning, because in watercolor you can always darken something, but you cannot lighten it up once it's done. That's why we started from the lightest areas of my bananas, if you remember that. Now it's time to add these final touches. So again, darkening the shadow areas, adding more of these spots now, making them look darker. So I'm placing them irregularly. This is very important. I want them to look random. I'm also varying these spots in sizes and in tone. So some of them are darker, some of them are lighter. This is very important too. Final touches, I'm adding this thin outline on some of my bananas. And then using the same color, I'm just adding more and more final details everywhere I think it's needed. Again, with the tip of my brush, adding some spots, lines, tiny strokes. This is my favorite part of the painting, where everything looks good and it's just about having fun and adding these final touches that will really make your painting pop. And I think my illustration is ready at this stage. This is the final painting. I am happy of how it turned out, and I think it was a good example of how to create a fruit painting using watercolors and the light to dark method. So remember that we always apply lightest tones first, so that's why we started from yellow, and then we add dark details at the very end. If you like this video, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this content. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.